According to most studies, over 90% of freelancers fail within the first few months of starting out. Now, I ran a web agency for 5 years after freelancing for 2, and given the low lows of my journey, I don't just get this statistic, I myself came close to giving up quite a few times. Thankfully, I didn't. I built my agency to the point where it sustained all of my expenses comfortably, and so this video is a direct result of that journey, but it is also a result of a lot of research. I've read hundreds of articles about the topic, spoken to freelancers in the space, big and small, and in this video I want to share with you the mistakes we made so that you don't make them. And for each one of these 10 that I'm going to share, I'm really going to focus on what you can do and how you can better approach things like client relationships, sales, delivery, and other topics. And I will say, I worked in web design, but these tips that I will share, they apply to any type of service delivery, whether you're a graphic designer, a social media marketer, a copywriter, a software developer, whatever it is. The first big mistake that freelancers or agency owners make is that they don't have any predictable or stable or recurring revenue. They essentially get a new project that they worked really hard to get, they deliver it, and then they just move on. That's the wrong way to approach things, because you have to view your clients and your customers as a relationship that you are nourishing every time you work on a project. And this isn't shady. Like when web agencies, for example, set up maintenance services, it really is about delivering value where it makes the most sense, and it's really a win-win. So the agency has a continuous flow of work. You are actually providing more value to your customer. You're not leaving them hanging after delivering that first initial project. And you don't want to force this. If it makes sense to continuously deliver value, that's the sweet spot, and you want to focus on that to create your recurring revenue. But for some services like copywriting, I'm well aware that there's no such thing as maintaining a blog article that's been posted. And so for those, what I can recommend is a retainer model, for example, where you offer a set amount of blog posts every month or unlimited graphic design edits. And it's not always better than other things. For example, if you have a high ticket service that's very much in demand and you're able to generate a pipeline of customers every month to serve, you might just be fine doing your one-off projects with one client and moving on to the next. The key is to make sure you have that pipeline going. The second mistake is positioning yourself as a service or a commodity instead of the outcome that you are delivering. So what this can look like, for example, is if you're a web designer like I was, instead of pitching to your customers the benefits, the impact of what you will be doing for them, such as higher sales or a better reputation, whatever it is that matters to them, the mistake is selling the service itself, saying it's going to be quick, saying it's going to be technically advanced. Customers and clients don't really care about your service specifically. Your service is almost always the means to an end. If you're a graphic designer, they really want your visuals to be engaging. And so what they're working towards is more views, for example. And so obviously you do want to be specific and highlight the features of what you're offering, but it's very important to speak about your impact before the service. Because if you speak more about the service, that makes you easier to replace and to compare to any other person offering that service. Okay, next, and this is super important, a big mistake some freelancers make, especially early on, is that they think like employees. So they're used to always getting projects from their bosses, for example, if they come from corporate, or they're used to this mentality of, I get something to do, I do it. If they're happy, the customer might hire them again, but that's just how it works. And so when they get into a freelancer or entrepreneur role, they're now just adding that sales component. So they know that there's something new, which is they need to sell projects to give themselves work. But that's all they think is different. Well, that's where they're wrong. When you run a business, you are not just selling something to work on it, deliver it, and move on. If you want to take things to the next level and make it, you really have to think longer term about how you're standardizing things, about how you're working yourself out of delivery, how you're scaling, how you're standardizing, how you're creating processes. And this comes from a famous book called The E-Myth Revisited. But the idea is that you really want to think like a large corporation, like the McDonald's of the world, which have specific processes in place for how they create a hamburger, for example, to create efficiencies. And so that they, the person who creates this hamburger, can be replaced easily within the business. When I was a web designer, one of the big things that made me stand out was that I really cared about the goals of the clients that I was serving. So I made sure that whatever they told me was their priority was weaved into the work we did. And so when I was working to improve processes and free time for me to focus on other things, when I hired some people, I made sure there were processes in place, like templates, to make sure that outcome was standardized. And that's how big corporations think. And we are not big corporations as freelancers, but that's how we have to think if we want to get to the next level and scale, because that's the only way to do it. You yourself cannot be delivering every project every single time. Sometimes you might need to outsource, sometimes you might need to hire. And even if you are just a solopreneur, you want to have time to think about sales, about partnerships, about growing. And you can't think about that if you're in the vicious cycle of I sell something, I deliver it, and it's just we keep doing that 40 hours a week or however hours a week you want to work. All right, next is pricing per hour. And this is a big controversial topic in this space, but here's how I would sum it up from all the research and from my journey. My recommendation is that you price per project or per outcome or per milestone instead of per hour. It is easier to lead with value when your pricing does the same. And it also makes it easier for the client to budget and to think, okay, I know what I'm getting and this is what I'm paying. So you're also de-risking it for them. You want to make sure though that you are pricing comfortably and leaving room for exactly what we just talked about if things are going to take longer. So it's a balance. Is that the recommendation always and 100% what you should always do? No. There might be some services that work better per hour because that's just the way they work. And I highly recommend you test things out. So if one method seems to be working well, stick with it, but always pilot new things and try things out. Okay, the next mistake freelancers make is that they don't prioritize the client as much as they should. Your clients, your customers as a freelancer are your boss. They have to absolutely love you, not just for them to hire you again. They also have to absolutely love you so you don't have issues with the delivery that you're going through. Your customers really are your boss, and you have to nourish that relationship because at the end of the day, whether you're working with a mom and pop cafe right in front of your house locally or with a Fortune 500 company and you've made it big, in both cases, you will be working and delivering to and communicating with people. And people are all the same in the sense that they value relationships and trust. And the way you build that trust is little things. So you answer emails quickly, for example, even if you don't have the answer to a customer, or if you didn't finish something yet, you answer them right away and you tell them, I will get back to you. Other small things. My agency used to send out holiday gifts for people. And I was always surprised at how impactful these gifts were. I used to send out very personalized holiday gifts. So it wasn't your standard chocolates or whatever, and that made them stand out. But even just sending a gift apparently was something that very few freelancers did. And it made a big difference in my business. There were some customers that I remember very well would get the gift and then would remember I existed and would hire me again just because they got this holiday gift. Of course, it depended on the customer. So remember that it's always people that you're working with and your client needs to love you and you have to under-promise, over-deliver. Just nourish that relationship. Okay, the next big mistake that freelancers make is that they talk more than they listen. Or they don't listen well. So what I mean by this is that you want to listen more than you talk because that's how you sell well, that's how you learn to communicate well, and that is how you deliver well. You want to understand the priorities of your client because you're working for them to deliver on those priorities. You want to understand how they think so that you can match that, so you can read the room and communicate your value better to them. As a web designer, I remember vividly that sometimes I would have clients that would just prioritize things that were very new to me. For some clients, their goal wasn't to sell more online because they already had a very strong demand for their products through other channels. And their only goal for a website was reputation. And if I hadn't listened more than I had talked, I wouldn't know that. So that's a small example, but it is more meaningful than that. Some clients I remember right off the bat would tell me that they weren't technical, that they didn't understand the world of web design. And for you, that might be the world of software development or the world of copywriting. Understanding that early on in your conversation by listening more than talking when you're selling or when you're talking about the project or whatever it is. That helps you then position yourself better to match that energy. For example, if someone told me that they weren't technical at all and that they didn't know anything about technology, I wouldn't come in and be like, okay, so your monthly plan includes hosting and an SSL certificate. Like, they don't know what that is. And so I would use other type of jargon or language to match that energy because you want to match how you're talking to the persona you are talking to. Okay, next, and this is a big one because I don't hear it talked about at all. A mistake freelancers make is that they gatekeep value in hopes to be rehired. And this is the worst way to get pipeline and to get more revenue. Let me give you an example. When you build a website, there are some things that you do to make the website easy to understand so that if someone else needs to edit it or make changes or improvements to it, they can do so without needing to talk to you. It's the same for code, for example. When you write clean code, any software developer should be able to go into that code later and add things to it or understand what's going on without needing to talk to you. And so there's this trap of thinking, oh, what if I make just a little thing harder to understand or less clean or less optimal so that if they need to make a change to it, they come back to me? And that is the worst way to generate more revenue, because the real way you create a partnership where your client is coming back to you every time is not by doing these shady things, which will create issues for you and your reputation. It's not by doing this. You create that partnership and recurring projects and business by becoming the go-to partner in what you do. So for example, I have one client that came to me asking for my advice on different proposals and quotes he received for a service that was related to web design, but not web design. And I gave him that for free. And so I positioned myself as an expert in this space in the way that I became a trusted partner to this client. And he came back to me with projects when it was appropriate and relevant. Did I build a horrible website that was hard to maintain in hopes that he would come back to me anytime there was a change that needed to be made? Absolutely not. And you'd be surprised how many people do this. Okay, next, this is small but super important. Freelancers make the mistake of not documenting things. In life, this is true, but especially in business and especially as an entrepreneur or a freelancer, you want to have everything in writing as much as possible. And so what this means, for example, is that having contracts would be ideal. But if you feel like it's not necessary, at least have everything in emails, not just on the phone and verbally. At least have an invoice as a single source of truth that you can go back to if your client or customer says, oh, didn't we agree to having 10 of these revisions? Or didn't we say you would also do the publishing for me? Have a single source of truth in writing that you can go back to objectively to refer to what you're delivering, how much you're charging, what are the terms and conditions and things like that. This is the kind of thing where you spend an extra hour or two, whatever it is per client, but you're saving yourself hundreds of hours or thousands of dollars in case something goes wrong. All right, we're almost there. Another mistake that freelancers make is they neglect administrative stuff and finances. Your admin work, like your finances, bookkeeping, accounting, marketing, is just as important, if not more important, arguably, than your delivery and sales. You want to know your finances well as a freelancer because you signed up for this. You didn't sign up to just do your work really well. You also signed up to be an entrepreneur and a business person. And what that means is that you know your finances well because it is your livelihood at stake at this point. So you don't have to become a CFA, you don't have to have gone through business school, but at least make sure you have a solid understanding of how business works, what's a profit and loss statement, how do you keep track of expenses, all of this stuff. I'm actually a big finance geek or nerd, and I actually do my own corporate taxes for my company, which I know is not the case for everyone, but you don't have to go all in like I did. You definitely can just watch a few YouTube videos, understand what's going on, get a good invoicing software, make sure you run everything through it, make sure you're tracking expenses as you go, not leaving it until the end of the year. Do these small things and it's gonna pay off big time. And beyond finances, there's also another piece of administrative work, which is cleaning things up, creating templates, and having a strong portfolio and presence yourself. There's this joke that I very much relate to as a web designer, but that most graphic designers and web designers, they do great work for their customers, but they do bad work for themselves. So if you go to the website of a web agency, well, their website is going to be pretty bad, but the websites in their portfolio are pretty good. So don't be that person. Try not to be that freelancer. Make sure you spend time on your own self and your own business and do things well. Okay. We're at the last one, but this one is huge. This mistake that I'm going to talk about is when freelancers don't prioritize discovery and the initial steps of the project. Strong discovery can make or break your relationship with a client and the project success. And this is what every piece of research I've ever seen says. This is what my 7 years have taught me. And whether you have just a first call, you know, those discovery calls with the client, or you have a questionnaire you send out to your customers, make sure you have something to understand goals, priorities, what they're looking for exactly, because this builds trust and it level sets expectations for your work. It's also a strong sales tool, believe it or not. Even after you've sold a project, you are still working to get buy-in from your client. because they took a risk and they've signed on with you, but they still don't fully trust you because they haven't worked with you yet. And the easiest way to build that trust early on is reflecting back to them what they told you. Be that mirror into their soul. Like, just literally repeat things back to them, and you'd be surprised how impactful that can be. People love to hear validation, and they love to have their perspectives repeated back to them because it shows them that you understand and that you're here to help them. And this will help you then frame your work effectively around those pain points that they told you about. If they told you they're not able to sell much online and you're delivering a website for them, well, maybe halfway through the project, you'll make sure to always frame your recommendations as supporting that goal. This also comes back to the listening part. If you do discovery well, you're going to know how to talk to this client better because you know if they're technical or not, and you can then adapt your message to that. Intelligent scoping is also super important here. You can really quickly fall into the trap as a freelancer of doing a lot more work than you thought you promised because you didn't understand what your client thought in detail early on. So with strong discovery comes definition setting. And for some clients, for example, saying you'll do a social media post might not mean the same thing to the both of you. A client might say, oh, by social media post, I meant a template and resources for us to learn how to use that template. Whereas for you, it literally just meant sending them one visual. So it's really important to scope well early on and to understand what they mean by something, what you mean by something, and exactly what you're working on. And then you can document it like we talked about in all these other tips. Okay, that is it. But before you leave, I want you to leave a comment below telling me if there's any one of these 10 that you want me to expand on. Again, 7 years have taught me a lot. There were high highs and low lows across all topics. So if there's something you want me to talk more about or share more about, please let me know in the comments below. Also, like if you found this valuable, send it to a friend that's a freelancer or any freelancer you know in your life that could benefit from it. And subscribe. It is free. It helps me make more videos. It tells me you're enjoying this. And it helps you see more of this. If you're a freelancer, I will be making a lot of that content because I've gone through it and I know that it's a lot. And so I hope to share what I learned through my experience. All right, thank you for watching.